So 13.4, we're going to look at inverse trig functions. We're going to start with something we know how to do from the last lesson. What if we want to find just a side length using our right triangle trigonometry? So here we have x is our hypotenuse, 12 is adjacent to the angle 37. Just as a reminder, we ask which of our three trig ratios that we would use. So SOHCAHTOA, let's use cosine because we have the adjacent side and the hypotenuse. So we'd say cosine 37 is equal to 12 over x. And we could have used secant as well. If we would have done secant 37, we would have got x over 12. That would have worked fine. But x is equal to 12 over cosine 37. Then we can use our calculator to get an estimation. 12 divided by cosine 37 degrees. Always forget the squiggly. We get about 15.03. So let's go with that. 15.03 for x. So that's old stuff. But today we're going to look at, well, what if we have two side lengths and we want to find the angle measure? How do we undo the cosine or the sine or the tangent? Well, we do that by using inverse trigonometry. So we label inverse trig by this -1 notation, but please know that that's not taking the sine of whatever angle to the negative first power. Like the inverse of sine is different from cosecant. They're not the same thing, but we do use this -1 notation, which might be more confusing than anything. But here's how it works. So if you wanted to find what the measure of angle theta was, and you had the opposite side and the adjacent side, you would say tangent of theta is equal to 23 over 8. And then when we do the inverse tangent of both sides, that undoes the tangent. So there's no such thing as dividing by tangent, but to undo the tangent, we do the inverse tangent. And then in our calculator, we get something like 70.82 degrees. So let's try another one together. We have x here. This side is 8. This is 11. So this is the hypotenuse. 8 is the opposite side. So which trig ratio deals with the opposite and the hypotenuse? Well, that's sine. So we'd say sine of x equals 8 over 11. Now to undo the sine, we do the inverse sine. So x is equal to the inverse sine of 8 over 11. Now in the calculator, in the TI Nspire, you gotta know a little trick in order for this to give you an angle measure. So we're gonna do this. We'll do trig, press our inverse sine, 8 divided by 11. And then I'm going to get an estimated answer, and it gets us 0.81434. And clearly that angle is much bigger than 0.81434 degrees. And the reason we're getting this number is because it's giving our answer in radians. So a quick conversion to degrees you can do is you can press this little book on the right side of your calculator, and then go all the way down. Mine's already here, but go all the way down to this DD. What this DD does is it's going to change your radians to degrees. So you click that and then press enter, and boom, we get 46.66 degrees. So you get your answer in radians, press the book, go down to DD, 46.66 degrees. So we can also do this for some of our more common solutions using our unit circle. So if you have your unit circle out, go ahead and pull it out, make it handy. So if you're using the sine or the tangent inverse, you're only going to focus on the right half of the circle using quadrants 1 and 4. For cosine, for the inverse of cosine, you're going to use the top half of the circle. A silly way to remember this is sine tangent. Kind of looks like Santa. Santa has a big belly, so we only focus on Santa's big belly for sine and tangent. Cosine, we look at the top. Cosine starts with a C, so you can picture like Santa's cap up here. The reason we do this is because technically we get two answers when we use our unit circle, but kind of like when we did square roots, when you're asked just to evaluate with a square root, we only care about the positive. But when you solve using square roots, you care about both answers, the positive and the negative. Very similar for inverse sine, cosine, and tangent. If you're asked to evaluate, we only give one answer, and that one answer is given in these two quadrants for sine and tangent, and quadrants 1 and 2 for cosine. If you're asked to solve and you're not given an interval, you would give both answers. So let's see what I mean. If we want to solve for x, given that sine of x is equal to the square root of 2 over 2, what we're going to do is we're going to take out our unit circle and look for the square root over 2 in the sine spot, which is the y value. Remember, it's always cosine for x, sine for y. So when we do that, if we're looking at our unit circle, we're looking where is y equal to the square root of 2 over 2. So you can look at all these points. Oh, right here. But it's also the square root of 2 over 2 at 3 pi over 4. So our two answers are pi over 4 and 3 pi over 4. But since we're dealing with sine, we only care about the first and the fourth quadrant. Since there's no answer in the fourth quadrant, our answer is just going to be pi over 4. Remember, what we're doing here is we're solving for an angle measure, which in our case is going to be in radians. So 45 degrees or pi over 4 radians is our answer we care about. We don't care about 135 because it's in the second quadrant, which for sine, we don't care about. Now, I get that this idea is a little confusing. We'll try a couple more. Where is theta? Where does theta give you a cosine value of 1/2 or an x value of 1/2? So let's go back to our unit circle. Remember, for cosine, we care about Santa's cap. So we're looking at the first two quadrants. Where is cosine x equal to positive 1/2? Well, the only option is right here. Remember, cosine is x, and x is equal to 1/2. So our answer here is pi over 3. For tangent, where is tangent of theta equal to -1? Well, on our unit circle, at least this unit circle, we don't have a spot for tangent. We know cosine is x and sine is y. Well, tangent is just sine over cosine. So to figure out what tangent is, since tangent is just sine over cosine, we're wondering when y divided by x is equal to -1. And we're looking in these two quadrants here. So here, that's not equal to -1. Ooh, if we divide square root of 2 by the over 2 divided by the square root of 2 over 2, we get +1. So that brings us down here where our x value is positive square root of 2 over 2. Our y value is negative square root of 2 over 2. And if we were to divide those, we would get -1. So our answer here is 7 pi over 4. And we did all that using our unit circle without using a calculator. And obviously, if you had a calculator, you could do that with a calculator. But just by using the unit circle, you can get these. And once you get the unit circle memorized, maybe next year or what have you, you're going to be able to come up with these numbers actually pretty quick. And that wraps us up for 13.4.